What if the person you trusted most was the one plotting your downfall? What if the man sleeping next to you at night was keeping a secret so dangerous it could destroy everything you've built? And what if a loving mother was willing to use her own child as a weapon just to keep a powerful man silent? Welcome to Port Charles, people, because things are not just heating up, they are boiling over. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are a General Hospital fan, then buckle up, because today we are breaking down one of the most jaw-dropping, twist-filled, drama-packed episodes in recent memory. We are talking about secret romances being nearly exposed, a son coming to his mother with a plan so ruthless it's almost hard to believe, a woman keeping her own husband mentally locked away on purpose, and a teenager who might just blow up everything with a single conversation. There is so much happening right now in Port Charles that it's almost impossible to keep up. But don't worry, that's exactly what we're here for. We are going to walk through every single storyline, explain what's going on, why it matters, and what might happen next. So if you're ready, let's dive in. Part 1. Carly and Valentin. A romance on the edge of disaster. Let's start with Carly, because honestly, her storyline right now is giving us everything: romance, danger, loyalty, and just a tiny little sprinkle of chaos. So picture this. Valentin is at Carly's place. He's being sweet and charming, suggesting he cook her dinner instead of her doing the whole takeout thing again. It's actually a really cute moment. You can feel the warmth between them. These two have clearly built something real. But then, knock knock, Michael shows up at the door. Now, for those of you who might be newer to the show, Michael is Carly's son. And Valentin? Well, he's not exactly someone Michael would be thrilled to find hanging around his mother. So Carly does what any quick-thinking woman in a secret romance would do. She rushes Valentin out of sight, hidden, gone, like he was never there. And then she listens to what her son has to say. Michael walks in and starts laying out this plan he's been cooking up. And when we say this plan is bold, we mean it might be one of the most calculated, cold-blooded moves we've seen from him in a long time. Here's the deal. Michael wants custody of his child. And right now, Willow is standing in the way of that. So Michael has been trying to find an angle, something that gives him the upper hand. And apparently, he thinks he found it. His plan? Push Chase and Brook Lynn into an affair. Yes, you heard that right. He wants to engineer a scandal involving his own cousin Brook Lynn and her ex Chase. And why would that give him an advantage? Because Chase, as some viewers may remember, broke rules, actual legal rules, to help Brook Lynn with something in the past. So if it comes out that Brook Lynn is having an affair with a man who bent the law for her benefit, that's not just personal drama. That's the kind of scandal that could destroy a congresswoman's reputation. And in a custody battle, reputation matters enormously. Michael believes that if this scandal goes public, it would practically guarantee that he gets custody. A congresswoman wrapped up in an affair tied to someone who committed misconduct on her behalf? That's career-ending stuff, court-influencing stuff. Now, Michael does say, in what might be the most uncomfortable self-awareness moment, that he doesn't necessarily want to ruin Brook Lynn's happiness. But then he follows that up with something really telling. He says something like, if Chase would actually do something like that, did Brook Lynn ever really know him? Which is honestly a really interesting way to justify something that is clearly wrong. He's almost pre-framing the betrayal as inevitable, like, if it happens, it just proves she was living an illusion. Carly listens to all of this, and you can imagine the look on her face. Once Michael finally leaves, Valentin comes out of hiding. He makes a little joke, says if Michael had seen him, it would have killed Michael. But then the conversation takes a much darker turn, because Valentin mentions the possibility of killing Jack Brennan, and he's not joking. Now, Jack Brennan, for context, is someone who has been causing major problems in this world. He's tied to Carly romantically, or was, and he's been involved in some very shady business that puts Valentin in a dangerous position. Carly pushes back hard. She protests. She doesn't want Valentin going down that road. And Valentin asks her something that cuts right to the heart of it all. Does she still have feelings for Jack? And Carly's response is really emotional and really revealing. She doesn't really answer the question directly. Instead, She shifts focus to something more urgent. She says she already lost Jason. She cannot lose Valentin too. That line alone tells you so much about where Carly's heart is right now. She's been through grief. She's been through loss. And she is not willing to watch someone else she cares about get destroyed. So she pushes Valentin toward the plan, the safe plan, the one where they work together to clear Valentin's name and make sure Jack is the one who ends up holding all the blame. It's a partnership, it's a love story, and it's also a little bit of a survival strategy. Part 2. Curtis, Laura, and the Isaiah situation. Now let's shift over to another storyline that's been building quietly, but is starting to get really interesting. Curtis goes to see Laura. Yes, the Laura, the mayor of Port Charles herself, and he comes with a specific request. He wants her help with something that he's framing as a favor, but it's really more complicated than that. Curtis is trying to push the blame for something onto Isaiah. He's been circling around this guy, trying to connect him to a hit-and-run situation. And he goes to Laura, hoping she can help him build that case. But here's where it gets interesting, because Isaiah's car does have damage on it. There's visible damage. And Isaiah's explanation is that he accidentally scraped a wall in a parking garage. A totally mundane, boring explanation. Curtis points out that driving away from an accident is technically a crime, even if it was just a wall. But Laura, ever the voice of reason, asks a very important question. She says, what if the driver didn't even realize anything happened? And that's a fair point. A bump against a wall in a parking garage? You might not even feel it. But what Laura then does is really sharp. She turns the focus back on Curtis himself. She asks him point blank, do you actually believe it was Isaiah, or do you just want it to be him? That's a powerful question, because there's a huge difference between following evidence and following desire. And sometimes when we're hurting or when we want answers, we can accidentally start bending our perception of reality to fit the story we've already decided is true. Laura then brings up something that really makes Curtis stop and think. She reminds him that he, Jordan, and Isaiah are all connected permanently because of a baby, a child who is part of all of their lives now. And if Curtis starts throwing accusations around and stirring up conflict, those waves are going to come back to shore eventually. It seems like Laura's words are actually getting through to him. Curtis starts to hear her. And while this storyline might seem lower key compared to the others, it's setting up what could be a very complicated personal and legal mess down the road. Part 3. Joss and the secret she's carrying. Oh, Joss, she's always been the kind of person who can't help getting involved in her mother's business. And right now, she's walking a very thin line. So Joss is at the hospital, and she starts asking Lucas questions about a patient named Cullum. And Lucas, being sharp, notices that she seems weirdly interested in this particular person. He asks her, "Why are you so focused on this patient?" And Joss gives an answer that's technically true, but also clearly covers something deeper. She says it's not really about Cullum, it's about her mom. And Jason. She explains that with Jason now gone, she's worried that Carly might do something reckless, something dangerous, something driven by grief or desperation. This opens up a whole conversation between Joss and Lucas about Carly's love life. And Lucas floats a theory. He suggests that maybe Carly has been seeing Sonny again, like romantically. But Joss shuts that down immediately. She's completely sure that's not the case. And the way she says it, the certainty in her voice, it really does feel like Joss knows exactly who her mother is actually involved with. Valentin. It seems like Joss has figured it out. Or maybe Carly trusted her with the truth. Either way, Joss appears to be aware of the secret romance. But then comes the moment that really raises the stakes. Because later, Joss goes to Jack Brennan's hotel room. She goes to see Jack, the man who was involved with Carly, and she tells him, straight up, that he has already lost Carly. Now the question is, does she tell him why? Does she reveal Valentin? Does she try to use this conversation to protect her mother? Or is she just trying to get Jack to back off and give Carly space? The show seems to be hinting that Joss might be about to say more than she probably should. And if she does, That could create a chain reaction that nobody is ready for. Part 4. Alexis, Brook Lynn, and the custody complication. Meanwhile, over in the park, we get a really warm but also really sobering conversation between Alexis and Brook Lynn. Brook Lynn has a little girl with her, a child named Phoebe, and she introduces her to Alexis as the newest honorary quartermain, which is adorable. The Quartermains are one of the most iconic families in soap history, and the idea of a little girl being brought into that world is genuinely sweet. But Brook Lynn isn't just enjoying the moment. She's got a practical concern. She quickly pivots and starts asking Alexis, who is a lawyer, by the way, about custody, specifically how to make things official with Phoebe. And Alexis, being the direct and no-nonsense attorney that she is, gives Brook Lynn some real talk. First, she says that Brook Lynn and Chase need to make things official quickly, because there are already many other families in the system who have been waiting, legally, patiently, by the rules, to adopt a child. And if Brook Lynn and Chase want to cut in line, essentially, they're going to have to convince a court to overlook its own established process. That's not easy. That's actually really hard. And then Alexis drops the line that should make every viewer sit up a little straighter. She says, "If you go down this road, you have to be ready for all your secrets to come out. All of them. In a custody proceeding, both parties get examined. Every corner of your life can be turned upside down. Everything you've tried to hide, everything you'd rather not revisit, it could all end up on the table in a courtroom." For Brook Lynn and Chase, who clearly have some complicated history and some things they'd probably prefer stayed buried, that warning is not a small one. This storyline is setting up what could be an absolutely explosive custody battle. And with Michael also having Brook Lynn and Chase in his crosshairs for his own scheming, things could get very messy, very fast. Part 5. Brennan and Nina, a deal, a release, and a dismissal. Let's talk about Jack Brennan for a moment because he's clearly trying to reposition himself in this story. Brennan approaches Nina and suggests they take another look at where they stand with each other, essentially renegotiating their dynamic. He makes some promises that sound almost too good to be true. He says he won't use Charlotte as leverage in his search for Valentine. He says he won't hold the traffic footage over Willow's head anymore. He's backing off. He's releasing his grip. And when Nina asks him what the catch is, he says there isn't one. Now. Does anyone believe that? Because we certainly have some questions. Nina, for her part, can't quite hide her satisfaction. She kind of gloats a little, suggesting that Brennan is scared. Specifically, she thinks he's backing down because he's afraid Carly would be furious if she found out he'd been holding that footage over Willow. In other words, Nina thinks Brennan's change of heart is motivated by self-preservation. He doesn't want to lose Carly. But Nina has been talking to Valentine. And based on their previous conversations about setting Jack up, she's already decided what her next move is. She tells Brennan, essentially, we're done. Whatever this was between them, she's calling it finished. It's a clean break. Or at least, it looks like one on the surface. Later, Nina goes to Charlotte to apologize. And Charlotte, being a teenager with very strong feelings, is not in the mood to hear it. She's not interested in the apology. She's shut down. That small moment with Charlotte is actually really important because Charlotte tends to be a character who acts on her feelings impulsively. A teenager who feels ignored or dismissed by her parent. That's a powder keg waiting to blow. Part 6. Willow, Drew, and the darkest revelation of All Okay. We saved the most disturbing part for now. Because this storyline with Willow and Drew is heading somewhere genuinely chilling. So Liz, who works at the hospital and has been paying close attention to Drew's condition, tells Willow something significant. She says Drew blinked an SOS signal, a distress signal, with his eyes. Which is extraordinary because it suggests that Drew is aware of his surroundings and is actively trying to communicate. Now, any loving wife, any person who cares about their partner, would hear that and feel hope, would want to follow up, would want to explore every possible way to help him reach out. But Willow's reaction? She dismisses it. She tells Liz that Drew is just frustrated, that he's acting out because he's locked in and doesn't know what's happening around him. She downplays the entire thing as an emotional reaction, rather than a deliberate communication. Liz then suggests something that could genuinely change everything: an eye tracking device. These are real medical tools, by the way, that allow people who cannot speak or move to communicate through their eye movements alone. It could give Drew his voice back. And what does Willow say? She says it would crush his spirit. She says it would make Drew feel like she doesn't believe he's ever going to recover. She frames blocking this technology as an act of mercy. But viewers already know that's not the real reason. Because later, Willow goes to see her mother Nina and reveals the truth. She says she is keeping Drew in this locked-in state deliberately, just long enough to get something she can use against him. Some piece of information, some leverage, something she can hold over his head to guarantee his silence once he eventually wakes up. She isn't protecting him. She's trapping him. She is using her position as his wife, the person legally authorized to make decisions about his care, to prevent him from communicating with the outside world, because she knows that once Drew can speak, what he says might destroy her. That is not just drama. That is morally terrifying. And it puts Drew's life in a completely different kind of danger than anyone outside of that room realizes. And it gets worse. Because just outside Nina's office at that very moment, Charlotte and her friend Jacinda are having their own conversation, talking about how much they dislike both Nina and Willow. And then Michael shows up. He tells Jacinda he has a new plan to deal with Willow. So now you have Michael plotting against Willow from one direction, Willow plotting to silence Drew from another, Liz growing more suspicious by the day. And Lucas, back at the hospital, says out loud what many viewers have been thinking. Maybe Willow doesn't want Drew to communicate because she's afraid of what he'll say. The circle is closing. The truth is getting closer to the surface. And when it finally breaks through, the fallout is going to be massive. Part 7. Nathan, Lulu, Rocco, and the secret that's already spreading now. Let's check in on the storyline involving the person going by the name Nathan, which, as regular viewers know, is actually Cassius and Lulu. These two are in a bit of a panic right now. And the reason is Rocco. Rocco apparently told Britt something that he absolutely should not have. He revealed that Nathan, Cassius, shot Callum. That is a huge secret. The kind of secret that, if it gets out to the wrong person, could unravel everything. Lulu sort of tries to calm things down. She figures Britt will stay quiet, partly out of affection for the boy, partly because she wouldn't want to hurt him. But Cassius points out something that Lulu can't really argue with. He says Britt might hold on to that information and use it later, when and if she ever needs something. That's not a loyal keeper of secrets. That's someone with a card up their sleeve. So Cassius makes a call. He says they need to get Rocco out of town for a while. Because Rocco, bless him, simply does not have the temperament to carry a secret like this quietly. He's going to slip up again. Maybe already has. And every slip brings them closer to disaster. While they're still arguing about what to do, Isaiah shows up. He's brought more antibiotics for Rocco, which is actually a nice gesture. He's looking out for the kid. But then Isaiah drops something that completely reframes his situation. He says he can't tell anyone where he was the night Rocco got hurt, not because he's guilty, but because of doctor-patient confidentiality. He was with a patient, he was doing his job, and because of the ethics of his profession, he can't prove it. So if Curtis points a finger at him, if the investigation starts going in Isaiah's direction, Isaiah cannot defend himself without violating a patient's privacy. He's stuck. He literally cannot clear his own name. That is one of those tragic irony situations that soap opera does so well. The innocent man who looks guilty because doing the right thing means staying silent. Now let's just take a breath and zoom out for a second, because there's a lot happening and it helps to understand why these storylines are landing so hard right now. Port Charles has always been a place where the line between love and manipulation is extremely thin. And what's so compelling about this current stretch of episodes is that almost every single character is making choices that are driven by fear. Carly is afraid of losing Valentin, and underneath that, afraid of being alone again after Jason's death. Michael is afraid of losing his child, and that fear is pushing him toward strategies that could make him look like the villain in his own story. Willow is afraid of Drew waking up and telling the truth, and that fear has led her to cross a line that is genuinely difficult to come back from. Brook Lynn is afraid of losing Phoebe, a child she's already fallen in love with, and now she's being told that fighting for her might expose everything she's tried to keep private. Isaiah is afraid of being wrongly accused, and the very thing that could save him is the very thing he's ethically forbidden from sharing. Fear is driving this entire canvas right now, and when people act from a place of fear, the decisions they make are almost never the right ones. They're the ones that create more problems, more conflict, more mess. That's what makes General Hospital so addictive. You understand why everyone is doing what they're doing, even when what they're doing is wrong. Let's talk about what all of this might mean going forward. Starting with Michael's plan to push Chase and Brook Lynn into a scandal, this is risky on multiple levels. First, there's no guarantee Chase would actually take the bait. Chase is someone who genuinely loves Brook Lynn and has worked hard to rebuild trust with her. He's not someone who falls easily into manipulation. Second, if Michael's role in engineering this ever came to light, that would be a custody nightmare for him. You can't show up in a custody battle after deliberately sabotaging your cousin's marriage and expect that to go unnoticed. With Valentin and Carly, the biggest threat right now isn't Jack, it's Joss. Because if Joss tells Jack about Valentin, Jack becomes unpredictable. And an unpredictable Jack could blow up the entire plan Carly and Valentin are working toward. With Willow and Drew, this is on a countdown. Lucas is already suspicious. Liz is asking uncomfortable questions. And sooner or later, someone is going to figure out what Willow is actually doing. The question is whether Drew can find a way to communicate before that happens, and whether he still trusts that anyone will listen. With Isaiah, this is the kind of situation that can spiral badly if Curtis keeps pushing. Because if Curtis pushes too hard, Isaiah might eventually decide that protecting his patient is less important than protecting his own freedom. And that decision would have consequences for a lot of people. And with Brook Lynn's custody fight for Phoebe, the warning from Alexis about secrets being exposed is not just a legal disclaimer. It's a setup. You don't put that kind of warning on screen unless the show is planning to actually follow through on it. There are secrets coming out. The only question is whose and when. So there you have it, everyone. A full breakdown of everything going down in Port Charles right now. And honestly, we are exhausted just from talking about it in the best possible way. From Carly's dangerous romance with Valentin, to Michael's ice-cold custody scheming, to Willow doing the unthinkable to keep Drew quiet, to Brook Lynn being warned that her past could come back to bite her in court, this show is firing on all cylinders right now. And we didn't even get into what's coming next, because apparently someone is going to try to get a rise out of Ava. And if there's one person in Port Charles you do not want to poke, it's Ava Jerome. But before we go, we want to hear from you. What storyline has you the most hooked right now? Are you rooting for Carly and Valentin to make it? Do you think Michael's plan is going to backfire spectacularly? And what do you think is going to happen when Drew finally gets a chance to communicate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and we love hearing your theories. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps us bring you more of this content. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We cover General Hospital spoilers, breakdowns, and drama every single week. Thank you so much for watching. Stay dramatic, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.